Hi guys, what's up? My name is David and welcome back to my channel. So, if you have already been watching my videos, you'll notice that I'm back home. If you have been watching since the beginning of my channel, you recognize this wall behind me and stuff. And also, if you've been watching my videos, you'll notice that I cut my hair. I have a mullet now. Yay. But anyways, I just returned home from my exchange to Stockholm and I'm back in the Netherlands and I have so much to do again. So I didn't really have much time to do some kind of research for a more factual video. So I thought today I would make another queer slash personal related one and talk about my relationship with my past self. So, for context, if you don't know me, I am a trans man from Poland. I came out as trans when I was 13 and I am 19 now, so it's been a long time. And I have heard a lot of stories from my friends and other trans people online that they have difficulties connecting with who they were before they realized they were trans. And I don't want to be like, I'm better than everyone else because I'm not. Absolutely not saying that. But I don't have that problem. I still consider myself the same person, I guess. But what is a person? Let's get philosophical. What is a self? Is it constant? Does it change? Am I still the same person as I was a few years ago? Or am I someone completely different? Am I the same individual? Am I an individual? Or am I always part of something bigger? Well, if you're interested in discussions like that, then keep watching. So, let's start at the beginning, right? Well, not really the beginning, but the beginning of me being trans. I mean, I guess I've always been, but I found the words for it when I was about 11 or 12. Before that, I just assumed every girl wanted to be a guy, and apparently that was not the case. So when I started experiencing gender dysphoria, which means that I was uncomfortable with parts of my body and my existence, like social dysphoria, when you start experiencing that, a lot of your efforts and energy go towards keeping yourself alive, basically, because dysphoria is just irritating to deal with, especially if you don't know if it will ever get better, if you don't know when you'll have the access to the care that you need. So it is perfectly normal in a way for trans people to be very invested in their transness because it affects every aspect of your life, especially before you're able to transition, if you want to medically or socially transition. So it is like logical to kind of lose interest in things that you were interested in before being trans really started being a thing. But it is also harmful to say that, oh, trans people only talk about being trans and it's like their whole personality and stuff. It isn't. It isn't. It's just one big problem that you have to deal with constantly that non trans people do not have to deal with. So, apart from just doing your hobbies and living your life, working, going to school, you also have to worry about your gender. And that can be difficult, especially if your hobbies or like pastimes, interests include something that is gender related. Like, for example, if you do a sport where you have to go to a changing room, like which changing room to go to, cis people don't have to worry about that. So they don't have all those issues, but trans people do. And the same thing with school. Can I be out at school? Will I be accepted at school? If you're not trans or any other marginalized group in society, then you don't have to worry about that. And I completely understand that it's difficult to see that other people do struggle if you don't. But that doesn't mean that other people don't struggle with that. But that being said, when you start having as much issues with either like how you're perceived or your own body, you can start losing interest in other hobbies because it's just not fun anymore. Like depression rates are very high within the trans community, not because being trans is somehow causing that, but the lack of acceptance of trans people is causing that. And because of that, yeah, you just lose interest in your hobbies because it's just too difficult to just do them as any other person who doesn't have gender related issues. And sometimes when your dysphoria is lessened or completely cured by medically and socially transitioning, you sometimes find yourself asking, okay, but like, who am I now that I'm fine being myself? What do I do now? Being trans is not an issue anymore. And now what? What do I do? And I personally, as I said, I have not had this problem because my interests have stayed consistent and they don't have a lot to do with my gender. For context, I study Scandinavian studies, if you didn't know, if it wasn't obvious. And I liked that before I knew I was trans. I started listening to Swedish music when I was like 9, and that kept going through my discovery of myself. I guess it even helped in that. And I always had goals that were not transition related. But before I started testosterone, before I got top surgery, those were my biggest goals in life. And I know that people think that's selfish or people think that's weird, but reaching those goals has allowed me to do literally anything else in life, which I just couldn't do because I wasn't comfortable enough. And the same with stuff like appearance. Like, I always wanted to look this way, but I didn't. So now people assume that I have changed a lot based on how I look. But I was this. People just didn't see it yet. And I wasn't comfortable expressing it yet because I was insecure. And now I'm not. So, yay. And another thing that people have trouble with is once they've transitioned, like, what do you do with your past? Because you can pretend that you've never been trans, but you know that's not the case. And maybe you want to be stealth, which means that you want to go through life as the gender you identify without telling people that you are trans. But you will know. You'll probably have childhood pictures of yourself, but is it really yourself? Are you the same person that you were on those pictures? What even is a person? Like I said, what do you have in common right now with the person you were there? Is it the same body? But it isn't, right? Because you changed your body. And even if you weren't trans, you would have grown and you'll have an adult body instead of a child body, Is it the same personality? I mean, you could still have the same personality, but a lot of people don't when they grow up. That's the thing people forget with trans people, is that transitioning is not the only thing that changes in your life. You also just grow up. Like, of course, I am going to be a different person at 19 than I was at 12 because I am at university right now. And back then I was starting high school. So a lot of things have changed in my life, and that's okay. And another thing is phases. I know people who detransitioned, and for them, expressing themselves as trans was a phase. But that is not something that's bad. Being trans is not just undertaking medical decisions, and even if you do, that is your own responsibility and your own consent. And, people are allowed to have phases, but that doesn't mean that you're like a different person when you stop having that phase. Like, I had the Twilight phase, and, that's okay. I'm not ashamed of that. I still like Twilight. It's horrible, but it's fun to watch. So, yeah, I think people tend to forget that life is not some kind of straight, constant line, and you don't have to be trans in order to go through very different stages in your life. Growing up is normal for everyone, and changing your interest and changing your hobbies is also normal. But some people do keep the same interests as they have in childhood, whether that is because of a neurodivergency, if it's like a special interest, and that is okay. And, there is a lot of stigma around trans on one hand and autism and other neurodivergencies on the other hand. And I don't know. for me, like being autistic and trans is completely normal, and I don't know why people make such a big deal out of that. But again, you don't have to be neurodivergent to have similar hobbies throughout your entire life, you know? But, anyways, there's this whole thing of seeing being trans as some kind of before and after, but it's a process. It's not like you're this and then you're this. You're this and then you're this and then you're this and then you're this and then you're this. For me, life is a process, and so is transitioning. You know, that is why it's called transitioning. You're in transition from one thing to the other. But even that is slightly problematic because not everyone transitions to fit within a binary structure. You don't have to go from male to female or female to male. You can also just go from female to almost male, but also like not male, but also like not necessarily non binary, just like not male in the way that cis men are male. Gender is interesting and it's different for everyone. So, yeah, you don't have to be one or the other, and it also can change throughout your life. Even within cis people, they can feel like more feminine, less feminine. They can have like a mask or tomboy phase, and that doesn't change who they are. So I think trans people should also be allowed to just go through phases. And if thinking you're trans is a phase for you, then that is also completely fine. You don't need to have yourself figured out immediately at first try all the time. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to try things out. If you don't try things out, you'll never know what the right thing for you is. I tried this out, and it is the right thing for me, so I'm happy with that decision. But returning back to the concept of self, I know people who feel a disconnect between, for example, their childhood pictures and who they are right now. And again, I don't think this is necessarily trans only. I think people can change a lot from childhood to adulthood. Like, for example, if you used to be the fat kid and you lost weight and now you look completely different, and if you were to show a childhood picture of yourself to other people, they might also not see a connection between who you were back then and who you are right now. Because again, the idea of self and like being a constant person is slightly off to the actual experience, I believe. I think being is also a process. You are never one thing your entire life. You're a baby, then you're a toddler, then you're like a small child, a slightly bigger child, an even bigger child, an adult. You know, it's never constant, and you don't have to be the exact same person you were before you were someone else. But that doesn't mean there is no connection. Like for me, when I look at old pictures, I know that that is who I used to be. Sometimes it's weird to see, but it's not crazy. I don't feel horrible showing people my childhood pictures. I just, if they don't like understand what being trans is, they just think that I used to be a boy with long hair, and that's great. You know, it's not that big of a deal for me anymore. But I know that that is coming from a point of privilege. Like I have been on testosterone for almost 2.5 years. I've had top surgery. I can be myself now, and being myself does not only entail being trans. Again, I have similar interests to those I had before I started questioning my gender identity. And again, that is a privilege I have because some people don't, and then they have to find new stuff to enjoy. And you know, that is also fine. And I think this should also be taken up in gender affirming care because at some point you're like fully transitioned. And then what? Like a lot of people are not prepared to go through life as a cis person of their gender would. Like you have to learn how to be a functioning individual in society while being an oppressed minority. And that's difficult even for me, a white man. Like I'm still trans and I will always be trans no matter what I do. But that's why I think coming to terms with your old self is beneficial to your health and your enjoyment of your life. If you don't feel bad about who you were before, then you can enjoy who you are right now much more than if you feel like you have to constantly like keep this a secret. Because if you have to live with this like huge secret for your entire life, then I don't think you'll ever feel at peace. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people who don't like trans people who do know what trans people are. So even if you think you pass, there's always people who say like, no, we will always know you're trans. And if your life goal is to hide that, then that will probably make you feel bad. But if you yourself acknowledge that you will always be trans and that there's nothing wrong with that, then comments like that won't hurt as much, I guess. Like, there's always going to be hate. And until it stops being as targeted towards us, we'll just have to deal with it. And I know that is difficult, especially as someone who says they're trans online. And like, I get tons of hate comments, but I just don't care enough about those people's opinion about who I am because I know who I am. But if you're not entirely sure who you are, if you know you're trans but have difficulties like figuring other stuff out in your life, then those comments will probably make you more insecure and question yourself even more, which is okay. You don't have to have everything figured out, especially at my age. I'm 19 again. I have a lot of cis friends who have no idea what they want to do in their lives. And that's fine, you know? Everyone has a different trajectory, and you don't have to be on the same level as everyone else, especially if you're trans or any other minority that has different problems than just existing within society. Other people spend their high school years going out with their friends and stuff, and they don't have to worry about if they look flat enough or if people will gender them correctly, you know? It takes a lot of energy that you could have put somewhere else but weren't able to. So don't feel bad if your like real life starts later because you weren't able to fully live as yourself. You know, I have had the privilege to know I'm trans very early and access gender affirming care. But if you're not able to do that, then I know how difficult it is. But again, if you keep having hope in yourself and understand who you are as a person, then you will be able to understand, I guess, your position in society and what you want to do now that being trans is not an issue anymore. And also, people have this very utilitarian view of life, like, oh, what do you want to do when you grow up? What are your career goals? Like, you can have other goals in your life. Just being happy is also a great goal. And if you reach happiness, that is great. And if reaching happiness is not your life goal, you know, that is also fine. You know, people are religious and their goal is to like be a good person and go to heaven afterwards. You know, that is also great. You know, sometimes I wish I thought that. I don't believe in an afterlife. So for me, this is it. This is the only chance I get. And, you know, maybe I don't. Maybe I will be proven wrong when I die, and we'll see that when I die. But for now, this is the life I'm living, and I'm not going to let other people stop me from living my life how I want to. And of course, there are limits to what you can do. You can't just live your life in a way that negatively influences others. But to me, being trans is not something that negatively influences others. Others just choose to have negative feelings about that, and I don't care. So, yeah, I hope my point is clear in that accepting yourself as a concept, as a project that is constantly being worked on, as a process in transition, will help you figure out who you are and what your purpose on this earth is, I guess. So, thank you for listening to my rant, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please feel free to let me know down below what you liked, what your opinions are about this topic. If you want to see more content like this, subscribe to my channel, like this video, stuff like that. Feel free to share with your friends if you want to. And yeah, I will see you next week. Bye bye.